Hi everyone, Canthony Plantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Wildbirds Peacedrums record, Rhythm. Wildbirds Peacedrums is a husband-wife musical duo. They hail from Sweden. This is their third full-length studio album, if you're not counting the compilation/sister EP record they put out back in 2010. Typically, Wildbirds Peacedrums records feature the fantastic singing of Miriam Wallentin and the fantastic drumming of Werlin, and that's pretty much it. The duo is able to embrace influences hailing from jazz and art pop and maybe even a little bit of folk music and blues too, but just with drums and vocals a lot of the time. Of course, on their sophomore record, The Snake, they did bring in some extra instrumentation to, I guess, kind of progress past their very minimal beginnings on their debut album. And even though it's been about 8 years since the release of The Snake, it's not that Miriam and Andreas haven't been busy or doing other things. They, of course, last year together worked on Miriam's solo record, Miriam the Believer. Not to say that she did the album all by herself, but on this record it felt like more of a solo effort because she was really flexing her singer-songwriter muscles. And let's also not forget Andreas's and Miriam's participation in the Fire Orchestra, who came out with 2 albums recently, both of which they participated on. And now that they've done their thing in Fire Orchestra, they came out with that amazing Blood Donation Miriam the Believer record. They are getting back to the roots of what made them so popular in the first place, and that's Wildbirds Peacedrums. Now this thing is 9 tracks, it's 40 minutes, and sonically it's not quite as minimal as their early stuff. There are tracks that are simply, for the most part, just vocals and drums, like the song Ghost and Pains, the intro track of this LP, which rides heavy on a lot of vocal refrains, making it very catchy despite its instrumental simplicity. Along with the song Who I Was, which is the shortest track on the entire record, and maybe the most infectious too. Who I Was! Miriam's vocals sounding amazing on this track. So powerful, so much range, so much passion. Few singers could carry a record with just drums, and Miriam is certainly one of those voices. And of course, with many of these tracks just being vocals and drums, lyrics kind of stick out like a sore thumb. And a lot of the lyrics on this record, at least from what I can observe, seem to have a lot to do with relationships, love, and not just like this initial kind of lust-fueled love, more of like this long-term interconnectedness and the joy that can come from that, the complications that can come from that. This message was very perfectly displayed in the cover and single art for this record. Now, there are tracks that feature other instrumental accompaniment, but what comes into play is very subtle, like with the song The Offbeat, which features quite a bit of vocal overdubbing, maybe a few vocal samples here and there, and some very quiet but sporadic, jumpy, and somewhat glitchy synthesizers that progressively get louder as the song moves on. Feels like something that could have been lifted out of an LCD sound system track. The song Keep Some Hope seems to be aided by quite a bit of vocal overdubbing as well. And then there's a big bass line helping out the usual drum and vocal work on the track Gold Digger. There's also this growing ethereal atmosphere that I think is coming through with some just reverb-soaked background vocals on the back end of this track too. And just with all of this sonic color being put into the song, this track would have fit pretty comfortably on Miriam's solo LP. There are some moments where like a really primal drum beat that is fast-paced and just intense, or some really kooky background vocals might remind me of like a Tune Yards record or something like that, but not as much of a pop appeal, way more raw, way more energetic. It's more of just a comparison than an influence or anything like that, because these songs also sound like Wildbirds Peacedrums' previous stuff. It's not a comparison I just want to do to death. For the most part, the additional layers, which are very quiet a lot of the time, work really well. They work in favor of this album's appeal. The only moment that I think it works against this record is the song Soft Wind, Soft Death, where we have Miriam singing. She's multi-tracked her voice so many times to the point where her vocals are huge, they're slow, they're sweeping, they're gorgeous. I love the melody of this track, but the drum beat, which fades into the track. We don't even get a hard start on this song. We get this kind of weird fade, like we're happening upon the middle of this song. It just feels like it's coming from a completely different world. The vocals and the drums may be working at the same tempo, but it's almost as if the pacing and the groove of the vocals isn't really complemented by the drums and vice versa. There are also some moments like the closing track on here that feature some really interesting, maybe slightly Kate Bush-esque spoken word passages. Despite being built out of such a simple instrumental foundation, this record stays somewhat varied and entertaining on nearly every track here. Wildbirds and Peacedrums just come with the same fantastic level of talent they usually do, but maybe with just a little bit more accessibility on these new tracks. I'm feeling a strong 7 to a light 8 on this thing. Transition! If you've given this record a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. Anthony Fantano, Wildbirds and Peacedrums, forever.